to the Confident Marketing Leader podcast, where we empower you to make your mark as a strategic and impactful marketing leader. Each episode, join us as we bring in top industry experts to help you earn and keep your seat at the leadership table. All right. Well, I am very excited today to welcome Hassen. Did I pronounce that right?
You did.
Okay, good. To this series, which is all about building confident marketing leaders. And Aaron has an extraordinary journey from being inside of organizations and working at different positions within the C-suite. I think he's going to have a really good perspective on how marketers can gain more confidence and credibility in their roles. So welcome, Aaron.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Stacey. Appreciate it.
So let's start by, I guess, just diving in a little bit and telling everybody about your journey in B2B marketing and how you ended up where you are today.
Well, I grew up and I used to memorize commercials. Let's start there. I don't know if you identify with that, but I would
100%.
Watch the commercials, memorize them, and then I'd analyze their effectiveness. I didn't know back then that there was this thing called marketing, of course, but in the year 2000, I watched this movie, What Women Want, with Mel Gibson, and it sparked something. I was like, what is this? He's positioning products. He's designing campaigns. This is so fascinating. And in 2004, I founded a startup that was acquired 4 years later by a competitor. So I had an early success. I was the chief financer, operator, salesperson, marketer, all the roles. And it was like my on-the-ground MBA. And this is the experience that really solidified my interest in marketing. So from there, I began supporting founders like me, like I was, with their marketing. Since then, I've led marketing for a number of growing, often venture-backed startups. Today, I run AH Marketing. We're a fractional marketing service for busy founders. They're under pressure to perform. They have little time, few resources. We build their ideal growth strategies and help them carry those out and hopefully lead their markets.
Yes, that's awesome. And I think that's a really good background crash course because we often talk about marketers really need to understand the whole business. And coming from that startup background and being able to play all of those roles, now you have this perspective and can see how everything connects, which is great.
Yes.
So you work with a lot of founders who either have maybe a marketing team or they're in the process of building their first marketing team. What are the things that you're seeing right now? I mean, we've gone through a ton of change over the last year, and I'm just curious from your perspective, what are you seeing right now that B2B marketers are doing right?
The consumer has been through a lot in recent years, as you alluded to. The pandemic and isolation, civil unrest, political turmoil, corporate scandals, economic uncertainty, wars, health crisis, opioid epidemic. The list goes on and on and on. And the data that I see from Pew and Ipsos and even some of LinkedIn's own reporting reveal higher levels of consumer distrust. So this is where we have to focus our approach as marketers. Ann Hanley, who we know, she's the chief content officer at Marketing Profs. She always says that our job as marketers is to build awareness and then affinity and then trust. So I think today the way that companies can do that and marketers can help their companies do that is by developing personal brands because we like to connect with individuals. It's also through community-based marketing, giving us somewhere to belong and become, and customer experiences. So the way we connect is through experiences, whether that be live experiences like conferences or even online forums. I think those three are key. So that's kind of where I try to focus today.
Yeah. And I think, it's interesting. Like I'm active on LinkedIn. I know you are as well. And I work with a lot of marketers who are a little bit hesitant maybe in taking that first step toward the personal branding piece. A lot of the marketers are comfortable behind the scenes, right? Representing the brand or publishing content related to the brand, not necessarily about their own skill sets and expertise. And I see the same thing kind of happening and trickle down with the sales team. So I'm just curious if you have advice for marketing folks who want to get more active in their own personal brand and maybe influence internally how executives are participating online or how the sales team is.
Absolutely. You can be an asset not only to yourself and your career, but to your company. So using a personal brand to evangelize a problem on behalf of the customer is really key. And to do that, we have to establish a point of view and we have to build a movement around a new direction. So we've heard things like this dark social and even account-based marketing with Sangram Vajre and Terminus. These were movements and they turned into communities and books and other products and things and ways that we can engage with them. But it all starts with knowing your audience, who they are, what problems they face. And then you have to understand what your contribution is. And that goes to this question, which is the only I question. It's a differentiator question. It's what am I going to contribute uniquely here? And then you've got to start to deliver valuable insights consistently. That's really key is you got to show up consistently and empathetically. I mean, empathy is really the key to connection. And so that's where it starts. And I use channels like social media, which is a passive channel, by the way. You have audiences there, but it's sort of passive. Move those and turn those into active subscribers of your newsletter or podcast. And then from there, get folks to engage with you in a community. And that's where the bonding really happens.
Yeah, that's great. Great advice. So let's talk about a little, again, you're coming into organizations, you're working with founders, you're seeing and fixing messes that have been left behind. What are like maybe 2 or 3 things that you think B2B marketers should be focused on right now in terms of low-hanging fruit and where they could improve?
I have 2 unique experiences that shape my view on this question. We mentioned earlier about the fact that I started out as a founder, but I was also in the military for a time, and the military taught me about having one mission and being all in together. Obviously, the founder experience taught me about extreme ownership of a company's success or failure. So in essence, I believe, it's my philosophy that we have to market like owners. And to me, that means a marketing leader has to excel in 3 areas. They have to excel in the areas of the customer, staying in touch with our customer in the market. By the way, that's the very definition of marketer. So
100%.
marketers who don't understand their customers or the market they're in, the competitive landscape, the trends, they're not practicing marketing. That's something that it's a downfall I see consistently. But yeah, so it's about the customer, it's about the business, and it's about strategy. So understanding your customer, taking ownership of their buyer journey, but then in the business, understanding what the business fundamentals are, the business model, how you make money, profit and loss, and then spending the company's money like it's your own. Hopefully, you spend your money carefully. So, yeah. But you also got to communicate your impact and demonstrate ROI. We know that. It's really important to the CEO, the CFO, who is ultimately accountable to the board and investors. So they need to be able to communicate the impact and the value of marketing. And then lastly, as I mentioned, strategy. You got to start with strategy. You don't just default to tired tactics or saturated channels. I see this happening all the time. Marketers want to use the tried and true, what's most popular, but that's not what's going to bring the most impact. And that may not be where you're going to find your customers. So things like digital ads and SEO are actually trending down right now. It's important to understand that, which is why earlier I talked more about, personal brands, experiences, communities, because those have much more influence now than these push ads and SEO attempts, which, SEO is transitioning into search generative experience, SGE, with AI. So these are things that marketers have to really be able to adapt to. And I'll say one more thing from a strategy standpoint. Marketers, they have to leverage marketing as a strategic multiplier. What I mean by that is the sales team is not the only group that can drive revenue. Think about how marketers identify new markets and revenue streams, set up new partner channels. These are areas where the company can make money. We can support client success in their upsells and cross sells. There's so much we can do within the business to drive revenue outside of the sales team. But that's often lost, particularly with a marketer who's a tactical specialist and grew up in digital marketing and learning from YouTube. That's just not going to bring a lot of strategic value. So those are the three areas, like I said, that I focus on: the customer, the business, and strategy.
Yeah, and that resonates with me and what I see and what I share as well. That I think marketers, especially in B2B, for some reason have gotten so far away from customers that they rely on the sales team to learn about their customers, or sometimes maybe the customer success team. But often their customer research, if we can call it that, is let's do some keyword research. Let's look at some analytics or some data, but they're not really taking that next step to dive deeper. And that's ultimately what I see businesses want from their marketing team is come to the table with some customer insights and tell us what to do. Tell us the direction to go in based on this.
Yes, that's your seat at the table. You bring a knowledge of the customer and the market. And if you're not doing that, why are you there?
Tell me a little bit about, I know demonstrating ROI and showing impact is always top of mind for marketers. What are some, I guess, easy ways or maybe even symptoms that a marketer could look at to say, okay, I'm not doing a great job. Like here's some either tools or steps or things that I should be doing to help that, because I know that's a big pain point for a lot of marketers who report especially into a non-marketer, whether that's the CEO or the CFO is now getting more heavily involved in marketing planning, and they need to be able to communicate and they're just kind of speaking a different language.
Yeah, language is so key. It's incredible because a lot of CEOs and founders come from products or sales. So a lot of times they don't even understand what we're saying. And as marketers, our language matters, and we've got to communicate in ways that the C-suite and our leaders can understand. So oftentimes I introduce analogies and I try to build confidence by aligning myself with existing goals and things that they already understand. So concepts like leads now versus leads later. So if you're talking to a CEO who has a sales background, you say, obviously we need to fill the pipeline for closing business this quarter, but what are we doing about next quarter and next year? So leads now and leads later. And that allows you to have a strategy conversation, or explaining to folks, particularly sales folks, I like to say, hey guys and gals, in many ways, marketing is like visual sales. We just do it with words and pictures. So you're communicating over the phone, over Zoom directly, and we are communicating with words and pictures many times one to many. So I try to find those similarities and those points of understanding. And then I build confidence I leverage proven frameworks. That seems to work. I use Andy Cunningham's 6 C's of positioning, or Donald Miller's story brand messaging, or Clayton Christensen's jobs to be done. This builds confidence because these are proven frameworks. So this isn't a guessing process where you're going into the back room and doing a seance and coming out saying, aha, I've got the answer. That doesn't build trust. I also hold myself accountable to revenue. So I'm not afraid of accountability. And they like that because I'm thinking and I'm taking on the pressure as an owner would. You got to stay connected with the CEO, with your sales leader, with your customer success leader, your product leader, and especially your CFO. So like monthly lunches with your CFO on the calendar, really, really critical. You need to understand how this person sees the world, what's driving the business. Not only does the market change, but your business will change as it evolves through different phases, and you got to keep up with that. So your credibility is attached to many of these things that I mentioned.
Yeah, that's great. And I love that using proven frameworks. I think part of the challenge is just finding what those frameworks are, right? And learning these that you can kind of take and repeat and use in any organization, because there's a lot of, I guess, self-declared gurus out there that are touting one thing or the other. And I always kind of look at those with a grain of salt. That is this really your expertise, or is this something that you just came up with and you're really trying to push a way of thinking so that you could sell me something else? I see that with a lot of, people that run agencies, for example. And so I think part of that is just distilling what's going to work and being very well read and following the right type of people.
Yeah, you got to love this. You got to love this profession. You got to love to learn. You got to seek these things out. And oftentimes I'm in communities of marketers. I know you lead one called SOAR, and that's a great way to just curate ideas and get pointed to the right frameworks. So I rely on my communities for that.
Yeah, and I'll add some links to the frameworks that you mentioned today so that people can check those out because they are credible. And I know you've had interviews with some of these folks as well. So we'll share those resources to help steer marketers in the right way. Question about, let's look back over your career and think about maybe some of the common myths or misconceptions that you think either the C-suite has or maybe your peers have about B2B marketing. And how do we start to educate people and dispel some of those myths?
Some of the ones that I think drive marketers nuts, like everyone is a marketer. The statement that everyone is a marketer. First of all, this means everyone has dedicated their lives to studying our profession and spent the years that I have working in the field, solving marketing problems. Now, this can't be true. So I think salespeople go through similar things where people don't respect it as a profession. What it really is, if you tried it, you would understand how difficult it is. And the same is true with marketing. So this myth that everyone's a marketer is completely false, or that great products sell themselves.
Yeah.
And it's true they may.
That's dangerous.
Yeah, that one's dangerous. They may at first because you may be fortunate to catch a big wave and that's great. But what about 6 to 12 months later when the market changes? These are the companies that come to AH Marketing, my company now, and the pipeline has fallen off a cliff. And they're like, we had a product that was in high demand, but we've now lost product market fit. Can you help us?
Well, and I think that's an interesting one too, because a lot of the initial momentum is done through kind of sheer force, brute force and grit. And it's typically the founders looking at their network and exhausting their network. And it's like, once that layer is exhausted, then what? And that's, I think what you're saying is like, you got to have a plan in place. You can't just rely on this word of mouth if you haven't really done anything to promote that.
Yeah, that comes to an end and your investors will be highly irritated if you don't have a plan B. So this is when many start to realize the importance of marketing for sure. Another myth out there is like, it's all about the data. So I think data is important for understanding past behavior. Like, let's be clear on that. But to predict behaviors in the future and trends, which is important for marketing, we have to keep a pulse on people. And people are both rational and emotional. So really understanding people is key to seeing ahead. And as CMOs, you need to see ahead, not just the present. So we can get so caught up in our routines and just keeping up because we're so underwater sometimes with all the responsibilities that we have that we don't stay ahead. And that's keeping a pulse on the market, on your customer. You want to know and see the data, but you want to know your customer as well and read them. And the last one I have is just that marketing is a cost center. So how irritating is it when we hear that what we do is just spend money? Well, it's true when it's done wrong.
Right.
And it points to the suspicion and some of the layoffs and things like that. And so, I can understand the skepticism from the CFO position if they've had marketers that ran their operations like it was a cost center.
Yes. Well, yeah, and I think that's a big one philosophically, right? How the business thinks about marketing. I grew up in B2C marketing and then I switched over to B2B. And in B2C world, marketing is seen as an investment. Marketing is the sales channel. And so the business is putting a ton of money into marketing, into customer research, into experiments, into testing. And you just don't see that really on the B2B side because of some of these philosophies like, we have a great product, it will sell itself. And it's just philosophically a little bit challenging, I would say, for B2B marketers.
Yes.
Okay, so let's talk about the elephant in the room. 32% of CEOs trust their CMOs. And this is at an all-time low trust. We know that CMOs have the shortest tenure, anybody in the C-suite. And the thing is, like, on the one side, CEOs distrust their CMOs, but they really want to trust them. They want them to have more influence and trust, but it's just not happening. And so there's this huge sort of disconnect. Curious why you think that is and what can marketing leaders do to help bridge that trust gap?
Yes, this is a big problem, and it's one that's just close to my heart, something that I really want to help to solve. The great Peter Drucker famously said that business only has two basic functions, marketing and innovation. So the fact that the CMO role is in decline, I think is an urgent problem for business. And like you mentioned, we're seeing this as CFOs, CEOs lose trust in marketing's ability to steward resources and get bottom line results. We know that CMOs are losing influences and seat at the table, moving further down the org chart. And CEOs are now turning to their RevOps people before their marketing leader. Again, the data and CMO tenures are on life support. We're down to, I think I saw 1.9 years in the role now on average. So really for me, like I said, it's market like an owner. Those were some of the principles we talked about earlier. So you got to start with strategy. You don't just jump into tactics. You don't know what's going to work until you talk to your customer. The market changes continuously. Your customer changes continuously. You can't use those old approaches and expect them to have the same results. So you start with strategy. You use a trust-based approach. So people need to connect. They need to trust you. You can do that, like I said, with personal branding, community building, experiences. This is how people begin to connect and really bond. And so that's important. And you've got to lead from the marketing position. You've really got to do things that grow the company beyond just sales enablement, sales support. So it's really key, and that alignment and buy-in that you get from the trust that you earn is critical, and it's the source of your future success. You need to have some early wins, and you need to build that trust. What you're going to end up doing if you're really into this and you really want to serve this business is you're going to end up leading change, because you're going to start to see a future that maybe others don't, or opportunities that others don't, if you're doing your job right. And so leading change requires that people are on board and that they're going to take a risk with you. So that's why these things are incredibly important.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point, that marketers done right are in the business of creating and driving change. And sometimes that's, at least in my experience, that's been really frustrating working inside of an organization where you have to essentially sell internally and convince everybody internally that this is the way to go. And that is a completely different skill set that people didn't get into marketing because they wanted to be change drivers. Right? A lot of people get into marketing. It's like, oh, it seems fun. It's creative. And I love the commercials and I want to go work on some fun campaigns. And then they get inside of a business and they realize, oh, wow, the majority of my time is spent internally influencing my peers and my stakeholders, which can be an exhausting game if you're not doing it right. I don't know what your experience has been on that, but I think I love that. Yeah. The fact that marketers are leading change, and it starts with recognizing that and acknowledging that.
Yeah, and one of the key skill sets, I think, for marketers, and it's something that I'm learning right now, I wasn't always great at this, but is storytelling. So people connect via stories, and it's tied to that middle part of our brain. You know, the cerebral cortex, the outer part is very logical, but people are both rational and emotional. And we've really, through human history, as you know, have really communicated through stories. And that's how we have to do it. If we want to connect with people both internally in our own business and show them a positive future, but externally with our customers, and get them to opt in, to engage, to subscribe, to follow, to be a fan and be loyal. It's really storytelling. And that's something, like I said, that I've been working on.
Yeah, and I think that's a really interesting skill set to apply internally as well. I'm going to put a link to this article that I found on Harvard Business Review earlier this year that says your strategy needs a story. And they cite that only 28% of managers can correctly name 3 of their firm's strategic priorities, let alone know how to act upon them. So their whole thing here is that if you don't have like a mission and something that people internally can get around and that everybody internally can rally behind and recite, then you're missing out on this opportunity. And the way to communicate that, just like we do with customers, is to do it through the power of story. And so putting kind of a wrapper around it to get people excited. And it's a huge opportunity, I think, for marketers, because again, driving change, and you want people to rally behind something.
Yeah, I mentioned some frameworks earlier. Andy Cunningham, she helped Steve Jobs launch the Mac in 1983, and then she helped reposition BlackBerry, Oracle, Cisco, some of the biggest brands in Silicon Valley. And she uses an approach called the 6 C's. She's written a book called Get to Aha. And I use that approach with my customers. Ever since I learned it because I was, leading a company called Flex Receipts, and they ran into product market fit issues. And basically we had to reevaluate our value proposition and whether or not we were valuable to customers today. And so we went through a period of transition. I learned this framework, eventually got to meet Andy, and she taught me her framework directly. But it enables you to create a strategic narrative. We all know how well Apple did this and how well they sort of owned real estate into all of our minds. Think different, and here's to the crazy ones, and all of that sort of thing. And they're, to an extent, they had a great run doing those, and they're still so central to our lives that that strategic narrative is key both internally and externally, because people should be able to, anyone within your business and outside of your business should be able to explain you in a phrase, or understand what your mission is or what you're about in a phrase, something memorable that they can connect to and belong to. I help marketers become a founder's secret weapon, that sort of thing. That's what I do. But you got to figure out what your mission is and what you do.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, well, we're nearing the end here, so a couple more questions. The title of this series is The Confident Marketing Leader. So what advice would you give to someone who wants to build their confidence and credibility as a B2B marketing leader?
Get some great mentors. I have reached out to folks like Mark Schaefer. He's a 10 times best-selling author and just an exceptional individual, human being. He has mentored me. I'm in his Rise community. I mentioned Andy Cunningham. She's done the same. Sangram Vajri and I have a personal relationship. I mentioned he was the founder of Terminus, now GTM Partners. Anthony Anarino, he's actually in the sales field, but he's got he's a best-selling author. I read their books first and just understood their philosophies, and then began to reach out to them and say, hey, could you teach me your framework? Can I learn from you? Is there a way to engage with you? And these people are open to doing that because they're like us, and they really want to see change. They're teachers. And I think great marketers are great teachers. You mentioned how we have to bring people along when it comes to change management, and we have to show the way. So these are all people I look up to and respect, and have become just personal mentors of mine. And that's a great way to just reaffirm, what your capabilities, who you are, your contribution, and learn some new skills and feel like you're at the top of your game. So that's what I would recommend. You mentioned that I've done interviews with all these people. I have. You can find them on my website. It's just my name, AaronHassen.com. And,
Awesome.
This has been my classroom. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that's phenomenal advice, and doing the homework first, buying their book, reading their book, learning about them, following them, and then having the courage to reach out and ask for them to personally engage. I think that's a great way. I think a lot of people maybe just don't even take that step for fear that somebody's going to say no. But you could put yourself out there, and the worst thing that they can do is ignore you or say no. So what do you have to lose? And then you shared a lot of great tips and action items and tools and things. I mean, just to recap, what do you think is like one action that a B2B marketing leader can take today to help just start getting on a better path?
I would like you to follow me. If you're interested in my ideas, follow Stacy, join SOAR, seek out mentors, really continuous learning, that sort of thing, because I think that's going to accelerate your growth the most. On my part, you can subscribe to my LinkedIn newsletter. I put it out weekly, consistently. You can depend on it, and I'm always trying to present what's next and what's helpful for CMOs, marketers, and their founders. Because again, I want to help these marketers become a founder's best friend and secret weapon. So read my newsletter. I promise I won't let you down, and I'll always bring a perspective and some new learning and try to point you in the right direction, how you can be more effective.
Yes. Yeah. And I can vouch for that. Great. Aaron has really great insights and always is willing to share, which I appreciate about him. So how can people get in touch with you? I know you mentioned your website, and I'm going to put links to that, but any other way that you'd prefer people to get in touch?
Yeah, just subscribe to the newsletter. You can view those interviews I told you about on my website, aaronhassen.com. You can DM me on LinkedIn. I'm very active there. I've committed to posting on LinkedIn 3 to 4 times a week. In addition to the newsletter, post to my own blog, and I'm just trying to develop my own ideas and help the communities that I'm in. Maybe I can help you too. Amazing.
Thank you so much for joining us, Aaron. And hope everybody got some really great insights out of this today. Thank you.
This has been a pleasure and a lot of fun. Thank you, Stacy.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Confident Marketing Leader. I hope that you gained new insights to help you keep your seat at the leadership table. You can reach me anytime through LinkedIn and at shakemktg.com. Links are in my bio. And if you find this content interesting, or if you know another marketing leader who needs to know about it, please share it so we can help build up our credibility and make a bigger impact as a B2B marketing community. Looking forward to being with you again next time.